welcome to our staff town hall today. We're so happy to have you with us today. My name is Hallie Nicholson. I'm the HR Strategic Communication and Engagement Manager, or I'm your moderator today. So we've got a great group of panelists on hand today to answer your questions. We're going to be answering both questions that you submitted with your registration in advance of the event. And we also encourage you to submit your questions via the Q&A, and we can answer those questions as well today. We probably won't get to all the questions that are submitted, but we are keeping track of them, and we're adding them to an FAQ on the Return to Learn site, so you can check there and find more information. So with that, I would now like to welcome Chancellor Khosla for some welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Hallie, and good afternoon and welcome everybody. As you can probably tell, our winter quarter is going pretty well. UC San Diego continues to serve as a leading example for many other universities at this stage of the pandemic. After an expected uptick in positive cases in early January, we're back to the same levels of cases on campus that we saw throughout the full quarter. In fact, as we speak, the on-campus positivity rate is less than 0.1%. And sorry, the on-campus rate is less than 0.1%, and the off-campus is slightly more than 0.2%, for an average rate of 0.2%. Our staff positivity rate is also 0.2%. And for the last 4 days, we've had 0 positives for the staff and 0 positives for on-campus students. And if you ask me, what is it that is contributing to all of this success? Let me just say it is leadership, 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 and leadership from the staff, leadership from the faculty, and leadership from the students, not what you expected. You have all been great troopers. You've done an amazing job of being great partners in helping us achieve what we are achieving right now. And I know that this process of what I think of as leadership has not been very easy. The pandemic has been very difficult on every segment of our society. It's been very difficult on staff, it's been very difficult on students, and it's also been difficult on faculty. So we need to acknowledge that going forward, and we have to find ways of overcoming that or mitigating that. So the question right now that everybody's thinking about is, what about those vaccines? Maybe those vaccines can get us out of trouble. Well, the good news is there are vaccines out there. And again, UC San Diego, and thanks to Patty Mason, the CEO of our health system, has taken great leadership in delivering vaccines to not just the broader San Diego community, but also to UC San Diego faculty and staff. We were giving vaccines to 65 and above. And this past Saturday, Sunday, Monday, we had to close the Petco Park because we were short on vaccines or we had no vaccines. In the meantime, we've also opened a RIMAC facility for another 2,000 vaccines per day. I think this week is going to be a little bit tight, but come next week, we have shipments coming in. They have been impacted partly by the weather on the East Coast, but I think we're overcoming that right now. So come next week, the hope is that we would open up to phase 1B and we would start vaccinating a lot of our faculty and staff on campus. So I'm personally very excited about where we are. I think just about each and every one of you has played a very important role in bringing us to where we are right now. And I also want to say a big shout out to our health system leadership and health system staff who are doing an amazing job. And for all of you who are participating in and volunteering to be at this vaccine superstations, thank you, thank you, thank you. Without you, they would not be successful. So back to you, Hallie.
All right, thanks a bunch, Pradeep. All right, now I would like to welcome the host of our town hall today, our Chief Human Resources Officer, Nancy Resnick, to share some opening remarks with us.
Thank you so much, Hallie, and thank you, Chancellor Khosla. And good afternoon, everyone. It is great to see we have close to 1,000 folks and more than 1,000 registered for this staff town hall. I am happy to see everyone and really happy that we have an opportunity to connect in this way. So next month marks 1 year since UC San Diego's operations shifted significantly in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And as the pandemic continues to impact and disrupt our lives and our routines, many in our community may be experiencing anxiety, grief, loneliness, fear, and sadness. If you're looking for support, please remember that as a as a campus staff member or faculty member, you have access to a range of resources from our Faculty and Staff Assistance Program, FSAP, which is part of Human Resources. You'll see, we'll post information and a link in the chat to provide you with information about individual counseling, support groups, and other resources. And a little bit later in our program, we'll have the opportunity to hear directly from our FSAP director, Dr. Crystal Green, about a new biweekly well-being group for staff and faculty. On the topic of finding support, I continue to be so inspired by the kindness and caring that I see in our staff community. I see demonstrated every day. And one example is this: as we were sorting through questions we received to get ready for this staff town hall, we noticed that some of you used the question submission field to send messages of gratitude to our panelists and the behind the scenes panelists for the staff town hall, and also to check to see how we were doing. Thank you for checking in with us and for being so thoughtful and kind. Reading those submissions really was a bright spot for me. And I think that these kinds of thoughtful gestures really embody who we are as a staff community and as a broader community here at San Diego. And these help us to navigate through what is undoubtedly a challenging time for everyone. I'd also like to shine a spotlight on campus staff, along with our colleagues from UC San Diego Health, for the volunteering at the UC San Diego vaccination sites at Petco Park and RIMAC. With incredible support from many, including many of these volunteers, UC San Diego has now vaccinated more than 100,000 people. It's truly inspiring to see the way campus staff are eager to lend support to this effort. And I think this underscores the compassion and service-minded culture among our staff community. So thank you for that. Thank you for everything you do. And with that, let's get started. Back to you, Hallie.
All right, thank you, Nancy. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our first presenter. I'd like to introduce Dr. Angela Sosha. Angela is Interim Director of Student Health and Wellbeing, and she's going to offer an update about the state of the pandemic. So it's all you, Angela.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. And we start out with some good news and some nice progress. First slide. So how are we doing as a country? After hitting a peak in January of 250,000 new cases a day, we're now down to 90,000, below 90,000. That's still a very big number, and it's not where we need to go. It's not where we were in May. And so, but it is a marked improvement over the last month. Next slide. California hit its peak again in January, and significant, even a faster decline in the state of California. San Diego, great progress we've made here. Whoops, go to San Diego, we're good. And well, too fast. There we go. Okay, in San Diego, we've had a 10-fold reduction. We're now getting about 500 new cases a day. We were up to just under 4,500 at the peak. So nice progress there. Also, the positivity rate has fallen about 3-fold. It's still a little higher than we want it to be for sure. It's running about 5%. So we need to get those numbers down, but we've made some very nice progress over the last few weeks and fairly quick progress. Next slide. One of the keys for our campus, and I'm going to give some more data on the campus, has been our testing strategy. And I want to remind everyone, next slide.
So Angela, I wonder while we figure out our slides.
Yeah.
While we figure out our slides, I wonder if you want to share some information with us.
Yeah, what I was going to talk to is remind everybody how important to continue to test, not to let up on the preventative measures of distancing, masking, and hand sanitizing. Those things stay absolutely in place. The fact that things are improving, don't drop. And one of our core effective elements of our strategy has been the testing. Testing on a weekly basis is required of the students that are coming onto campus or living on campus, and we encourage it for all employees as well. The vending machines are working very well. There are some slight changes in the vending machines that will be coming on. I want folks to realize that. You will need your ID to swipe and get your kit. It'll no longer be a simple push. So you'll be getting kits just for yourself. We'll be monitoring it. You should test once a week. If you get an exposure, you have symptoms, retest at a closer interval. Otherwise, once a week is just fine. The other thing is that the kits come with all of their instructions. To identify the sample to you, you need to use the UCSD app and scan the barcode. Confirmation that you've correctly scanned the barcode is critical. If that step is missed, we have a sample, but we don't know who it belongs to. So that's a very important step on this. Also, kits should be returned within 3 days. We don't want the kits to stay around. Once you've sampled, you need to bring the kits back. Also, we encourage you to sample within a couple days of picking up a kit. So don't keep kits lying around for weeks, and certainly return a kit after you've sampled within 3 days. The last pickup every day is at 2 p.m. We will be expanding locations. In addition to the swipe card, another 9 locations will be coming on in the next couple weeks. Okay, next slide. I think we're back in sync. So how are we doing with all this testing? It's amazing. You know, you can see the number of tests since last March. It's pretty striking. And a lot of that has occurred in the last few months. The important thing, when you look at the student numbers, you'll see at the bottom, there are 2 shades of blue. Those students that reside on campus are in the darker blue, and those students off campus are in the lighter blue. So you'll see we are having days where we have 0 students on campus or only 1 off campus. Occasionally there'll be a day with a few more, but by and large, we're not seeing the numbers that we saw in January, where we would hit at a peak 40 students a day. The campus employee picture is also really good on the right. You're seeing days where we don't have a single campus employee, but a lot of campus testing for employees. So please keep up the testing. It's extremely helpful. As the Chancellor mentioned, our positivity rate of 0.2% exceeds what's happening in the community. Also, the turnaround time, generally you're going to get your result within 24 hours of testing. Occasionally, it'll be 2 days. If you don't have a result in your MyChart, please retest. Every once in a while, there's a scan didn't get captured or something happened. We'd rather you retest than assume you have a negative test. So we really want folks to make sure you are checking your test as well, not just assuming that if you have a positive result, someone will call you. So next slide. And check a look at the dashboard for the wastewater signals. Remember, the buildings that have wastewater positive will show up as red, and you can search for the building that you work in very easily. We are seeing the wastewater signals drop as we see the positivity rate drop and the viral activity drop on campus. So that's very encouraging. So these slides are pulled from the Return to Learn dashboard. Please take advantage of that dashboard. There's a whole lot of information in there. I just picked a few of the illustrative slides. Next slide. Okay, the RIMAC Center. So the RIMAC Center is a great collaborative effort to allow vaccination both for our campus community as well as patients of the health system, and potentially in the future we may have others from the public joining us there. We have the potential to go up to 5,000 vaccines a day. But as you've heard the Chancellor explain, we are really, the biggest challenge right now is getting vaccine. The production as well as the transport have greatly impacted the amount of vaccine that we have on hand. So vaccine supply is the primary control. The second control are the county requirements about who can be vaccinated, and I'll cover that in a second. So we are not able to independently decide who gets vaccinated. We also don't have as much vaccine as we would like. That's why you'll see, even though we plan to be open until 7 p.m., we're currently closing at 3 p.m. because that's all the vaccine that we have. We are offering both Moderna and Pfizer on different days. We don't mix the vaccines on the same day. That's a safety precaution. It works extremely well. There are roles for volunteers, including runner and observer, and you can, right now, the volunteer pool is pretty good. And so there's a bit of a pause as we wait to have more vaccine and a greater need for volunteers. But there will be volunteering opportunities for sure in the future. So please, no problem with signing up or at a later date. There will be plenty of volunteers because this will be open for at least a few months till we are able to vaccinate our community effectively. Shifts generally are 7.5 hours. And I think that's important here. Or the other thought people wonder, do volunteers get vaccinated? If there's supply at the end, rather than letting any vaccine go to waste, volunteers will get vaccinated. At this point, all campus employees over 65 have been invited to schedule their vaccination. Next slide. So we are following still a 1A guideline. The camp, which is right, we're in phase 1A. We haven't gone to full phase 1B, rather just in this individual 65 and older. So that is what we're with now. And as the Chancellor mentioned, we are optimistic that there will be enough vaccine to start the expansion. At that point, we will start reaching out to other employees. There is a very thoughtful vaccine strategy, vaccine prioritization committee. They take into account to make some decisions, and we have campus representatives on this. The risk of your impact, should you get COVID-19 on yourself, so your medical risk, they also take into account the risk of exposure. So all those factors have been taken into account, and there will be a process so you'll be notified when you are eligible for vaccination. So I think some confidence in the system that as soon as we have that vaccine and we can get it to you, we will be able to do that. And thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Dr. Sosha. Our next presenter, I'd like to welcome Dr. Chip Schooley, professor in the Department of Medicine in the Division of Infectious Diseases and Global Public Health. And Chip's going to speak to vaccines. So it's all you, Chip.
Thanks very much, Hallie. Things are moving rapidly, but not as rapidly as we'd like, obviously. This is a New York Times compilation of how things were going as of a couple of days ago. And you can see that California is in kind of the second tier in terms of the number of people per 100,000 that we've gotten to with vaccines so far. Next slide. One of the things that we've been looking at, and I think is important to raise, is this issue of viral variants that have been talked about increasingly and how they might affect vaccination and also the epidemic moving forward. This is a electron micrograph depiction you've seen of the virus before. The virus is kind of a soapy bubble that has affixed on its surface a number of spikes that are really three-part pieces of protein that serve as the hooks that the virus uses to get into cells that it's trying to infect. And mutations in these spikes are what are driving these new variants that are occurring. When we respond to the coronavirus with our antibody response, the antibodies are most effective in preventing that virus from going from you to someone else and controlling it in you are the ones that are directed at that spike. The virus is going to try to change that spike as best it can to get out from under your antibody response to be able to be successful at moving around the population again. And this evolution, which is very natural, has been occurring over the course of the last year. And we're now beginning to see more and more variants that are different enough from what was circulating before that our immune systems aren't quite as familiar with it, and the virus is able to come back around and infect people again. Next. Now, if you look down, if you look at these spikes, you can see that there is these red dots are amino acids that make up different parts of the protein. And you can see on the kind of on the red dot at what would be the Horn of Africa, if this were Africa, 6970. These are two amino acids that are dropped by the most recently described cluster of variants, this one from the United Kingdom, the so-called spike deletion mutation. And what this does is allows the virus to be twice as infectious. And when you have a virus that's twice as infectious, it's able to get around the population more rapidly, and it displaces the viruses that have been circulating before. There's another very important mutation at the very top at position 501. And what that one does is causes that spike to be able to attach to your cells much more tightly. So instead of jumping on and falling off and jumping on and falling off, viruses with a mutation at this location can attach to a cell and stay there until the virus gets into the cell and infects that cell. Again, helping the virus be able to get around faster and in fact make you a bit sicker because it's more effective in growing once it gets into you and it starts growing in your lungs. Next. There are now 3 new variants circulating. The first one I've talked about. Now we're looking down from the top of the spike down. The first variant I'll talk to you about, the so-called British variant, or also known as B1.1.7, is the one that is about 70% more able to spread and about 50% more likely to cause severe disease, particularly in people with underlying conditions than the virus we have had circulating up until now. It was initially evolved in the United Kingdom, but it's been in the US now for at least a month and has spread already rapidly throughout the US, including quite a few strains here in California. And we know we actually have it in San Diego. What Christian Anderson, who's been following this very closely at the Scripps Research Institute in collaboration with Rob Knight and his group here, expect is that this will replace the strains of virus that we've been seeing up until now over the course of the next month to month and a half. You've also heard recently about the South African variant. It has this same 501 amino acid change and the same deletions, but it adds one more here, now shown in yellow at position 548, the E548K mutation or EEK mutation. And what this one does is makes the virus less able to be taken down by some of our new vaccines. And the Brazilian variant is very much like the South African variant. So these two variants are very important because they're beginning to learn how to live in the presence of our vaccines. They're not as widespread in the US, but they will spread just like the British variant has with time. Next. Now, in terms of our vaccines, we are currently using vaccines made from messenger RNA, a very simple vaccine that is made by Pfizer and Moderna. These vaccines have to be given twice, Pfizer 3 weeks apart, Moderna 4 weeks apart, and they have to be kept very cold, so they're complicated to give in remote settings. They're currently available under an emergency use authorization from the Food and Drug Administration, and will likely be given full approval in the next couple of months. But these are the vaccines we've had to use at RIMAC and downtown. Next week, the FDA will consider a new vaccine by Johnson & Johnson, or Janssen, that is made in a disabled viral vector. It does the same thing that the messenger RNA vaccines do, which is it shows your immune system that spike we've been talking about. But the spikes from all three of these vaccines are the ones are made to look like the spikes from the viruses we've been dealing with before the new variants emerged. And we're going to see a little bit less protection with these new vaccines than against these vaccines against the new strains. We think the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, which are about 95% effective in preventing you from having symptomatic disease, in other words, even having a cold-like symptoms, and 99% effective against having severe disease. We think they'll be about 90% effective against symptomatic disease and probably 96 or 7% against severe disease. So they'll lose a little bit of efficacy. But next slide. This shows you where they are now. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, about 12 days after your first vaccination and continuing after your second vaccination, people who received the vaccine had very few new infections compared to those who got the placebo in the clinical trial, giving you this 95% protection against the open circles, which are cases that have any symptoms, or the closed circle, a severe case that actually got somebody in the hospital. So you can see these vaccines are extremely effective in preventing severe disease. Next. Now, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, instead of being about 90% effective against these new variants, loses a little bit. In the US, before the B117 vaccine got here, their success at preventing you from having any symptoms at all is about 72%. And success against severe disease is up around the 90% range. So it's really very good at keeping you out of the hospital. In Latin America, where the Brazilian strain is circulating, and in South Africa, where the South African strain is circulating, you can see that the protection from this Johnson & Johnson vaccine falls significantly, and even more in people who are HIV infected in South Africa. So overall, this vaccine is slightly less effective than the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines, but still protects globally 85% of the time against severe disease. And with currently circulating strains in the US, probably closer to 90 to 95% against severe disease. And these are the vaccines that we think we'll have over the next few months. Next. And I'm going to turn this back now to Hallie, and we can, I know the vaccine and strain story is complicated. We can answer some questions about it later.
Yeah, definitely. We'll dive into some vaccine questions when we get to our Q&A. Thank you, Chip. So next up for our update portion, I'd like to introduce the Vice Chancellor for Resource Management and Planning, Gary Matthews. So Gary, you're up.
Thank you, Hallie. I'd like to thank everybody on the call for all that you've done. It's been an amazing year, one that's been full of change, requiring pivot, and most importantly, safe behavior. So you've heard from others, continue to wear those masks, continue to do the social distancing. Routinely, we've been asked, what are we doing to keep us all, you all, as safe as possible? And some of the things that are happening are behind the scenes, or sometimes you can see them and you're wondering, well, what is that post? So what I've tried to do today is give you a couple of pictures showing our staff working in support of things that you may not always see. So we've installed quite a few automatic door openers to reduce touch. We've also increased our cleaning and disinfection program, and we've monitored the changes that the CDC, the state, and the county have provided us, and we're pivoting as we go to make sure that we follow the most effective procedures. We've retrofitted 85% of the campus's air filters to hospital grade filters, and that's one of the pictures that you see people standing up, putting in that filtration. Next slide, please. What we've also done is had to, because of either potential infections or folks that may have exhibited symptoms, we've also had to increase our cleaning, and we're calling that specifically disinfecting cleaning. So you can see the differences in the numbers, and they're pretty consistent with what we found in terms of our infection rates across the campus. So it went up in January, and it's certainly starting to come down, but we still must be on guard. Next slide. Some of the back of the house has also been involved with the development of signage. So you may have seen signage across the campus. That's our campus sign shop, and they've been quite busy. One suggestion I have, please, is pay attention to the signs. They are changing routinely as we get further direction from the county, state, CDC. We've also installed plexiglass in a number of our university operated vehicles, and those vehicles are being used to transport folks to isolation as needed, as well as to make sure that our disabled students, faculty, and staff are also being transported in different sanitized vehicles. One real happy note to report is that the Early Childhood Education Center has reopened. It still has limited numbers of availability, but the little ones are back. They're back in school, and that's probably one of my favorite pictures because it's been difficult for many parents to manage the workload, and we're happy to be able to contribute to bring the little ones back. Next slide. I think that's the last slide for me. We're routinely consulting with subject matter experts, and we're going to continue to advance our programs and processes. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Gary. And I agree. It's great to see that picture of the kids at the ECEC. So thank you for sharing that. All right. So next up, we're going to hear from Vice Chancellor and Chief Financial Officer, Pierre Millet. So Pierre, you're up.
We received a number of questions, as we often do, around the state of affairs on the financial side, and then what it means from a compensation standpoint. So I wanted to address them. It's actually very interesting timing because it sounds like the governor may be reinstating the cuts that we saw last year. So it's kind of flashing news on my screen. I'm trying to catch up with what's happening in California at the same time, and clearly this pandemic is full of surprises and twists. So what I wrote on the slide may have a bit of a more upbeat tone depending of if we can validate what's happening with the state. What we had up to an hour ago was a partial restoration of the state funding. Unfortunately, there is a rebunching exercise. Rebunching is the way the system allocates kind of state's resources. And there are 3 campuses in the UC that tend to receive less per student than we do, partly because they have less graduates and so forth. And the regions have been asking for kind of a narrowing of that weighting, which means that what we kind of won back on the state side, we are kind of losing back to what we call rebunching here. So my approach was what I've really tried to do for the system, avoid the high and avoid the lows as well, and enter the budget season in a no further cuts, but very limited investment approach in the budget process. And the idea was any investment that we make would be very tightly tied to enrollment. If we have more students in the classrooms, we need to put more resources in there as well. Now, if there is more positive news that gets confirmed, of course, that will allow us to do additional investments in areas that are very high priority, and we will use the budget process to do so. On the compensation front, I want to remind everybody that compensation decisions are made system-wide, not at the campus level. And clearly, no decision has been made for publicly covered employee at this time. It's quite possible that any announcement from the state today will have a bearing, but again, not the decision of this campus. What we discussed with the Chancellor and Chief Human Resource Officer is that if we were staying in a compensation freeze for policy covered staff, at least we would seek to reinstate the Star Awards for next year. People are working really hard. And that would be one thing that we would do to express thanks. But again, that's subject to OP's approval. And then I got a question around, are we going to see any retirement incentives? I believe at least one of the campus has used this lever. This is not the plan, never kind of was for UC San Diego. As you know, our approach was much more around hiring control. There are some significant issues with retirement incentive. You can lose your best talent, and that's not a very effective way to manage a downturn. So that's the position on the compensation front. If you go to the next slide, I also wanted to touch on a real kind of point of pain right now around the enterprise system renewal and particularly the financial system transition. And wanted to say one more time that we are very aware of the stress and of the challenges that come from the massive transition of our systems. I can tell you I have daily interactions with either chairs or kind of Senate leaders or PIs or fund managers or business officers, and so do Charles Ross and Kevin Shaw. And Kevin is with me on the town hall to answer any questions. I can tell you that we are acting on all levers to make your life easier. So, and we always listen for new suggestions. So just wanted to point out kind of some recent progress, a whole lot more reports being made available recently to make our jobs easier for what we need to do. Again, the ACR website is a great resource to see what's going on in terms of transitional issues and kind of best practices. We heard that the kind of a la carte online learning that we are kind of forced to put in place through the pandemic is not working for everyone. So the team is developing more formal instructor-led training for different kind of positions. We have onboarded resources to provide dedicated support to departments. So if you're really struggling or if your department is please reach out to administrative leader. And if it's not working, you can go straight to Kevin Shaw or Shah Ross or myself. I can tell you there is no bad escalation at this time. We're here to help, not to judge. A lot of work, of course, in terms of community engagement. There'll be a campus-wide survey to collect further feedback. So stay tuned for an invitation to participate. I'm also working with our HR teams in both health sciences and the campus to make sure we really look after everybody, particularly looking after the fund management and the research administration support. So again, stay tuned on this. And then we put in place a faculty support fund to make sure that if a PI is negatively affected by the system change, we would have a way to keep them whole. So a lot going on, as you can see. And the next slide, I will not go in detail, but it just gives you a sense of the new reports and dashboards that are being published. And again, please go to reports.ucsd.edu for more detail, and Kevin will be happy to answer more questions on this. Thank you, Hallie.
All right, thanks so much, Pierre. For our last update before we move into our Q&A, I'd like to welcome Crystal Green, the director of our Faculty and Staff Assistance Program, who's going to share some information about a new mental health resource.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here with you today. And just to acknowledge that we are at this 11-month mark of our work from home pandemic response. It's been challenging for all of us, as you've just heard from all of the presenters before me. But I think that there are also some things that we could highlight in the ways that we have also overcome many of these challenges. So without turning a blind eye to the losses and the pain, I also want to invite everyone to join this brief series that will meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays, beginning tomorrow, for this next month to usher in the 1-year mark. And I'm calling it Making Lemonade because I want to highlight how we've turned some really sour challenges into some sweet surprises, victories, blessings, and so forth. So I invite you to join me. Hallie's going to put the link for the Zoom in the chat. And this will be a place for us to come together as a community and celebrate the things that have gone right, sometimes surprising, sometimes the things that you always knew were going to be a little easier, like no commute time. But there's been some other things too. So I invite you to come and share your stories. And I'm saying, you know, if you have a story, bring it. But if you need a story, if you can't imagine what's gone right, if it's all just been really bleak and dreary for you, come onto the table, come share with us, and maybe you can pick up a story, a bit of energy for yourself and cheer some colleagues on at the same time. And we're going to be collecting some of these stories. We have a form that we can invite you to send. So if you can't join at 8 o'clock or 8:15 in the morning, then we still want you to send in your story and collect these, because we are all a part of history right now. And I hope that we will look back and we will see that we came together collectively. We made some differences that were lasting and positive, and that we will look back on this with some sense of pride that we pulled together as a community. So please join us, take a look in the chat. And if this is not your cup of lemonade, not cup of tea, we still have all of our FSAP services, as our Chief Human Resource Officer, Nancy Resnick, said at the top of the hour. Please come and see us at FSAP and we'll find something that's a fit for you. So stay healthy, stay distanced, keep your masks on, wash those hands, and show up for a glass of lemonade.
All right, thank you so much, Crystal. That's such a creative program and I can't wait to participate myself. So now let's move into the Q&A portion of our event today. I'd like to welcome all the panelists to join me on camera here, and we'll start jumping into the questions that our attendees submitted today. So as a reminder, we're going to take both questions that were submitted with your registrations in advance and questions that are coming on live. So yeah, so I'll have all our panelists join on camera and we'll get started. So I'm going to send the first question over to Dr. Sosha. So Angela, you mentioned this just a little bit, but maybe you can expound on it just a bit. What can you tell us about the accuracy of the COVID-19 test kits? Does it matter how long I wait before returning it? So can I do my swab, throw it in the back seat and come back a week later, or should I take it right in?
No, we want you to have it in ideally same day, but up to 3 days is fine. Partly that allows for if you drop it off after 2 p.m., it won't get picked up the next day. Don't push it beyond that. We want to have you in a clear safety range. So stick within the 3-day rule, sooner better, no problem. There's no degrading though in results. In other words, a result, if you drop it off on day 2 is not going to be different on day 1. But don't keep it for a week, please.
Cool, good to know. Thank you, Angela. All right, Chip, next question's coming your way. With the COVID virus mutating, how will we learn the effectiveness of the vaccine? And if the variants are more contagious, why are cases going down?
To answer the second question first, the viruses, the variants are slow getting to California. We know that they will get here. They composed about 2% of the viruses in California probably a month ago, 5% a couple of weeks ago, and they may be up to 10% now. And what happens is they gradually kind of build steam and they double. And when they double, they may be 10% now and 20% say in 3 weeks and 40% in 6 weeks. So we're in this rapid curve of increasing percentages now. The epidemic is getting better overall, and I think it's a combination of getting away from the winter break where we had a lot of people traveling and mixing with people they didn't normally interact with. There is a seasonal tendency to almost all respiratory viruses that has to do with a combination of being indoors and also humidity that allows some of the particles to change size and be more easily inhaled. I think more people are masking now. There's been a change in behavior, in part, I think, because of a more consistent tone from the federal government, and also because people saw what was going on around them in December and early January, and we're benefiting from all of those right now. All of those things, as was said before, will also reduce the spread of these new variants. But as the new variants arrive, we'll have to be more careful with the things we're doing because the new variants will be more effective at trying to evade these mitigation responses. We're watching for these very carefully on campus. Rob Knight and Christian Anderson are sequencing all the isolates from UC San Diego so that we can see what our own percentage is and make appropriate adjustments as they arrive.
Great. So while I have your ear, Chip, another vaccine question. What do we know about transmission to others after you've been vaccinated? How long does it take after the second dose for protection to kick in?
That's a great question. In some work that was led by a combination of people in the infection control program, including Francesca Torriani and Lucy Horton, and some people in our IT department, Chris Longhurst. We put together our data with those from UCLA and looked at hospital employees who were continuing to be tested weekly after they were vaccinated, and saw that there was continued shedding for the first couple of weeks at a fairly rapid clip, which you might expect because it was during the peak and because those people were infected before they were vaccinated. And then we began to see a gradual decline that got to quite low levels 4 to 6 weeks out, but not to zero. So what these vaccines will do is they will decrease the amount of shedding. They don't stop it completely, but we think in addition to decreasing the number of people who are shedding, they decrease the amount of virus you shed. They may not get you to the point that you can't shed it, which is why we still recommend people mask, but they are going to be able to make it harder for the virus to get around the community because the virus won't be shed for as long or as high a level in people who get vaccinated. So it's another reason to be vaccinated.
Great, thank you. All right, Nancy, this one's coming your way. So one of our attendees submits, I'm more productive and engaged when working from home. Will I be able to continue with that? And is May 31st still the expected date that staff currently working remotely will start returning to campus?
Okay, yeah, thanks for that question, Hallie. I know this is a very top of mind question for many of us. So in terms of the second part of the question, what we've communicated so far is the date of the end of May, that we've said those employees who are working remotely can expect that unless they hear otherwise from their supervisor to continue working remotely through that date. So to be determined whether that date will be extended. At this point, it has not been extended past that most recent communication. But remember that there previously have been extensions of time as we've navigated through just all of the dimensions of the pandemic. So let's look at the comment. I think what you said is I've been highly effective and productive working from home, or I love working from home and it's working well for me. I'm paraphrasing. I think many people have shared that perspective with us. Many people not only enjoy working from home, but we also see that work can be done very effectively remotely. It's also true, though, when we think about all the kinds of positions we have many positions which cannot be done remotely. We have many staff who have been coming to campus every day, and we rely on those staff to run our campus. The work they do is critical and does not lend itself to remote work. We also know that there are folks, and we've heard this quite a bit as well, who find it very challenging to work at home. It's been particularly challenging with the situation with K through 12 and trying to juggle multiple responsibilities on the home front involving caregiving in a variety of ways. So there are also some folks who really cannot wait to get back to campus and would much prefer to not be working from home. We see, I think, at this point, quite long forced experiment in moving in many ways to remote work. We see a lot of success. We see different ways of working. And it is incumbent upon us to take note and understand what those lessons are, and really think through how do we utilize the workplace? What really essential value comes from the workplace? Then there are very valuable aspects of human connection, spontaneity, engagement, a chance for a sort of celebration, and kind of sharing in a human community that I think many of us, or almost all of us, really do miss in this time. So as we look from this experience about really reimagining the workplace, how can we have a workplace that fosters innovation, that supports sustainability, that fundamentally is engaging for our employees, that is highly productive and effective? And I think it's clear that there's not going to be kind of a one-size-fits-all answer for this, but rather that we will look at shared principles and explore very thoughtfully how can we incorporate flexibility into the way we work in the future. So there is quite a bit of effort going on in this space around reimagining the workplace. I am very closely involved, as are many folks from different kind of areas of expertise across the campus community. And we are very actively working with the expectation that we will have an opportunity to discuss and get direction from senior leaders on this campus, and then be able to communicate more information out. Probably by the end of next month, we'll have an opportunity to have more information and more kind of guidance and clarity about this point. It's a very important aspect of changing our culture and looking as we move forward at who are we as UC San Diego? How can we attract and retain talent? How will we be the best place to work ever? How can we recognize where some aspects of the way in which we used to work really didn't add a lot of value to the workplace experience, either from the standpoint of productivity or the standpoint of the employee experience. But other aspects of being connected and engaged and fostering a sense of shared purpose are very, very critical. And we want to hold fast to the aspects that are so important. So as we continue to navigate, we'll have more information to share out about that. But I appreciate the question. I think it's a question on many people's minds, and for good reason, because a lot rests on it. So it's an important body of work that we're doing.
Yeah, I think timelines are in the questions we saw. A lot of people are wondering about timelines. So my next question is related to timelines. So maybe Pierre, this could be a question for you. Is it really realistic to be stating that we will be back to 100% in person on campus in fall with so much currently unknown?
So maybe a caveat, which is we haven't said that we will be back 100% on campus. The UC has said that the UC plans to be predominantly in-person teaching in the fall. And we're working to achieve that. It's easier to plan for more in-person and dial it back than the other way around. And of course, if the conditions are not what we hope for them to be, I mean, there is a hope that the majority of the population may be vaccinated by the fall. If it wasn't the case, or if the conditions were not what we need them to be, we would absolutely adjust. We always adjust based on the pandemic. But at this stage, again, it's predominantly in person as a planning assumption, and the plan is just a plan. The only other piece is, again, as Nancy said, I think some flexible work options will remain way past the pandemic anyway. So I don't think we'll have necessarily the same density kind of ever again.
Thank you. Gary, I see that you have marked a question in our Q&A that you would like to answer live related to air filtration. So you want to come on screen and share some information about that?
Yes, thank you. I think the question related to buildings that are considered non-core, and those with HVAC systems are in fact being looked at to ensure that we provide the highest level of filtration, as well as, for instance, one area we checked recently, the fan units were not operating at 100% outside fresh air. So we're looking at the filtration as well as airflow. There are also buildings, the older buildings may have if you have a window air conditioner or operable windows, then chances are that building is not receiving the highest level of filtration. And if there are concerns about airflow in the rooms that you're in, if it's an office space, certainly you can contact the EOC to do a review. The concern there is airflow, and most importantly, the social distancing required. And the distancing, particularly in an office space, will be really predicated on the flow of the air, and that's best discovered and discussed with the EOC. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Gary. Okay, Terry, here's a question for you. Will vaccines be required for staff and students to return to campus in the fall? And if not, why not?
So at this point, in the method that we have the vaccines approved, they cannot be mandated. And so we are not mandating vaccines for people to come to campus. If something changes with that, we'll let everyone know. But it's not a function of us suggesting in any way that people should not be vaccinated. They should be. They should all go get vaccinated as soon as they are able to. As soon as you get that email or that phone call or that text message, go get your vaccine wherever you can get it. That's a reputable place, of course. But there's not a mandate on that at this time because they are under emergency orders. But if that changes and a mandate comes down from either office of the president, or if we locally make that determination, we will let everyone know.
All right, great. Thank you, Terry. Kevin, it's so great to have you with us today. So we know that financial systems, ESR, it's on people's minds. So I'm wondering, what can you add to what Pierre shared about the financial systems progress? How's it been going, and what changes may be coming to OFC in the future?
Great, thanks for having me. The thing I would add is really emphasizing that it is challenging, it is hard, and I don't think any of us could have anticipated a global pandemic that's lasted, what was it, Nancy said, a year next week. And all of that has really added to the challenges of the transition. I saw a number of names in the Q&A that I recognize, fund managers out in departments that I've had the opportunity to work with. Really, there's been tremendous collaboration across the campus, and there's lots and lots of improvements that will be driven by input from departments. That's really where we're focusing our efforts on, is to gather feedback, listen, and to make those positive changes as quickly as possible. We've got a number of central offices that are running nights and weekends to work as quickly as possible to address issues. And so I don't think it's lost on myself or on the leadership team that that a system change with a chart of accounts and UC path in the middle of a pandemic, it pretty much couldn't be more complicated. And so I just wanted to add to what Pierre said, it's a big thank you to all of the staff members that are out there, no matter where you sit, that we recognize that this is challenging, and we're in it together, and we will continue to work as hard as we can to get us through it.
All right, thank you, Kevin. So here's a question that came in from our Q&A, and I'm going to send it either Chip or Angela, whoever wants to answer this question. So hand sanitizing and washing hands is good common sense, and I'll continue those precautions. I'm interested, though, if there have been any proven COVID infections that have come from touch contact with surfaces. It's hard to find studies on this. So basically, should people be wiping down their groceries, their mail, all that stuff?
There was a lot of concern about this early because we know that the virus is in your nasal cavity, it's in your mouth, and we put our hands around our mouth and we blow our noses, and so the virus is going to be in our hands, things that we touch. Having said that, the virus lives on being able to be transmitted in the air. It's an airborne virus, so we breathe it out and we breathe it in. And transmission by touching things is much less of a problem than we thought it was. It doesn't mean that we don't wipe things down and wash our hands. It's good in flu season anyway. I don't worry about feeling the avocados anymore. I used to worry about things at the grocery store. But right now, the thing that is really most important is keeping a good mask on and wearing it in the right way. Much more important than very OCD-ishly wiping everything down you touch. That's not where the money is for this particular virus. It's really with breathing. And as you say, it's very hard to prove that you got it by touching something, because we're around other people all the time, and we don't hold our breaths when we touch a doorknob. So
at least I don't. Maybe I should start. All right, so here's a question, and I'm wondering if there might be kind of two ways we can go on this question. So I think I'm going to send it to you first, Angela, and then maybe Terry, I don't know if you want to tack on anything from a different perspective. So the question is, once I'm fully vaccinated, do I still need to have a weekly COVID test? So there's like the general practice of getting weekly tests, and then there's the, if I work on campus, do I need to get my weekly test? So you want to start us off, Angela?
Yeah, at this point, we are recommending that we continue to do the weekly testing. I think it's important to remember that none of the vaccinations are 100%. Secondly, we have this issue of the variants being floating around, and that you don't get the full benefit of your vaccination until 2 weeks after your vaccine. So it's not like immediately you get your first shot, you're getting all the benefit. No, that's why there's a second dose and a waiting period. But even after that, for now, we're recommending weekly testing. I think that could potentially be revised. I think the health system is considering, on the town hall, there was a mention they're going to every other week for that, because so many individuals are vaccinated in that setting. The problem you have is you're moving around in a community where the vaccination rate is not that high. And so for now, we're going to take a conservative approach of recommending weekly testing and continuing, but we'll update you as the town halls go on over time.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, for the employees who are reporting to work in person, they are still required to test weekly, right? And so if that changes, we'll let you all know. But for all of the reasons Angela mentioned, take advantage of the free testing. If nothing else, test for your pod at home, right? Test for the family members who don't have access to free testing, or your grandparents, or those who you're bringing those groceries to, who you may be coming into contact with. Test for others, but do test until we say you don't need to. That's what I would encourage.
Great advice. All right, question for you, Gary. When do you anticipate on-campus events being allowed? Realistically, how much time after we return to work learn? So what kind of criteria are you looking at when making these decisions?
Well, certainly we will follow the guidance provided by the state, the county, and CDC, and certainly our experts on the panel. I think once we're provided greater understanding of not only the current virus, but the variants and how the impact is affecting us, as well as the efficacy of the vaccine, we'll have a better idea. At this juncture, we're probably not looking to return to what I would classify as anything close to normal until the fall. but there may be opportunities for smaller gatherings. We've talked about students getting together as Three's Company and smaller or different types of pods, but all of that's informed by the latest from the CDC, state and county. And Chip may have a better response in terms of when he may feel it might be safer.
No, we're moving in the right direction, and we need to consolidate the gains. And the more people are vaccinated and the more masking we have, the more we're going to be able to do. So it's we're in a better state than we were the last time we had this town hall, for sure.
All right, thank you both. Gary, inquiring minds want to know, how's the Wi-Fi in the outdoor tent classrooms?
In all candor, I've been told that it's pretty good, but I haven't used it myself. So if there are concerns and questions, they should certainly present them to us, and we'll coordinate with IT services. And Carlos JANSSEN is working closely with us, and the report so far is excellent. But if something happens tomorrow, by all means, people should report as quickly as possible.
Great, good to hear. All right, Pierre, do we anticipate the hiring freeze to extend past June 30th, 2021?
I would again caveat a little bit. We are not in a full hiring freeze. We are in hiring controls. So I am approving kind of any position that is kind of put forward by my colleagues because it's important. It's an important replacement. In some cases, even a few new positions, as long as it's kind of within the budget. The ability for the budget to fund the position. So we are not in hiring freeze. We are just in hiring control, just to allow us to, again, the goal was to kind of really reduce or eliminate the risk of layoffs by acting on that lever. So that's the situation we're in. I think what I'd like to do is let the budget process play out over the next couple of months. There is still a lot in flux, as you saw from my previous intervention. The state may happily surprise us. So depending of if we feel that the campus is in good shape, has really well responded to the crisis, that we don't have any significant issues or no deficit, I'm all for letting go of the hiring controls as of July 1st. But just please give us a couple of months to make that decision. We are going to be in hiring control until the end of the fiscal year. And I will promise to get back to this group before the beginning of the new fiscal with the update.
The fact that you are like receiving news as you're presenting to a town hall is a reminder to us about how fast this environment is changing and just kind of the world that we're living in right now. So this is a great example of that. Okay, so question from an attendee today, will UC San Diego open any drive-through vaccination sites like for testing? And I think I know the answer to that, but who wants to chime in?
When we mean drive-through, are we thinking of self-administered? Because the plan is to put in 2 parking areas, Osler and one on North Torrey Pines, a drive-up self-testing option so you don't have to park your car, go walk into campus, etc. So it will be easy access as a quote drive-through. If you mean provider administered testing, like we have at the Price Center, we don't plan on opening another on-campus provider administered testing site.
And the way the question's worded, I'm wondering if the person's asking, they're saying, do we have any drive-through vaccination sites? So I'll just say that's what Petco.
Sorry, vaccination sites, no. Right now, we're not planning on a drive-through vaccination site, partly because of the observation period. One of the nice features about the RIMAC is the wide open observation area. So vaccination drive-through, it does have some challenges in terms of safely monitoring and creating a good environment. And that's where RIMAC is a nice blend.
Great, thank you.
Right.
All right, so Chip, here's a question I'm going to send your way. So the person says, I know it's not related to campus exactly, but do you recommend going to regular doctor's appointments, dentist cleanings, et cetera, in this environment?
Doctors, yes, I recommend against all dentists. No, I'm kidding. If you need healthcare, you should get it. We've learned a lot about how to make things safe in medical settings, and I would definitely not neglect your healthcare while we're in the middle of a COVID epidemic.
Right, good advice. What is the likelihood that you take the vaccine and get sick? I think people might be hearing about some side effects. So what can you say about kind of how you feel after you get vaccinated?
Well, almost everybody will have a sore arm. By that I mean 80% plus. It's not excruciatingly sore. It's probably a little sorer than you get with a regular flu shot. But other than not being able to wash the dishes for a couple of months, I was fine. No, you feel better. Your arm gets better over the course of 2 or 3 days. Some people will get some swelling at the site, and there'll be some redness, but it's not just debilitating. Some people, a smaller percentage, much smaller percentage, will get fever and systemic symptoms that may last a day to a day and a half. That again are kind of fluish and go away. It tends to be a little bit worse after the second vaccination than the first, but that's not always the case. And it's worse for young people than it is for older people. And that's just because young people are more likely to have a good immune response when you give them a vaccine. It's part of it's kind of a good thing for your immune system to recognize that it's responding to the COVID spike protein. So those we see, we'll see those responses quite frequently. And they respond well to just propping your feet up or taking a Tylenol if you need to. There are a smaller number of people who have had an anaphylactic reaction, and this basically is what people who have shellfish allergies may have if they eat a lobster, for example. You get dizzy, may have trouble with your breathing, asthma, and that's why we ask people to stick around for 15 minutes to make sure that they're safe, and that's why all the vaccination centers are equipped to deal with that. That's what we do with EpiPens. So we've not had any deaths occur from this, but it's something that happens extremely rarely, but does occur, and we're prepared to deal with it. It happens more often in people who have had this kind of proclivity in the past. The first 2 of these that were recognized were in the UK when they began to roll the vaccines out, and happened to be in 2 people who had EpiPens in their pockets because they've had these responses before. We don't know why they're caused, but we know how to treat them, and it's not a reason not to get vaccinated when your time comes up. You should consult with your doctor and so forth, and let people know when you come in that you've had such a response, but it's manageable and it's extremely rare. There have been some even rarer side effects reported in one of the vaccines, Bell's palsy, which is kind of a transient weakness of your face, but it's not clear whether that's related to the vaccine or just something that occurs in the general population randomly and it happened to happen in a vaccine recipient. But the most common things are a sore arm, and you get over that.
Cool, good to know. So I want to jump back to Angela just for a minute. Angela, so it sounds like you got some information to share maybe about Petco.
Yeah, I want to mention that we do know that Petco will have to close because of baseball season. So the health system is actively looking at an alternate drive-up vaccination site that it will support, probably something south of the 8. The idea to distribute this around the county. The various health systems are each trying to manage so that there is a good blanket of the county. And some folks may have noticed that Scripps is opening on the Del Mar Fairgrounds. I think they opened last weekend. So we think with the RIMAC site and something further south in our community, we'll be offering a better distribution of vaccine access.
Awesome. It's cool to know it might be coming down the pike on the horizon. So we're closing in on 2:45. So I'm going to have this be our last question for the day, and I'll pose it to the group, but I wonder maybe Chip or Pierre, if you want to speak to this. How is our approach connected to or responsive to the county's tier system? Any news on leaving the purple phase and potential changes for students?
Sure.
Chip, you're the expert.
Okay, we're headed in the right direction. We're not there yet. But as we get closer to that, I think we'll see more ability to do things on campus, but also within San Diego in general in terms of the schools. There's a large effort to try to reopen the K through 12, and we're helping a number of school systems put things in place to be able to do that. And that's gotten less connected to the red, green, purple, orange, and blue colors that we were looking at last fall. And schools are basically being encouraged to open when it's felt that the conditions are in place for them to be safe to operate. So I think if we see this progress continue, I think we'll be in a good place with K-12 schools before too much longer as well.
Great. Well, if anybody has any final thoughts, now is your moment. Otherwise, I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. I want to remind you that you can find answers to a lot of the questions that we answered today, and probably some that we didn't as well, on the Return to Learn site and the FAQ there. I want to encourage you to take the survey that you'll receive after this event that helps us kind of schedule them, understand what you want to hear from us. So please make sure to share your feedback in that survey. And with that, thank you for being here, and we hope to see you next month on March 23rd. So have a great day.
Bye-bye.